the AI revolution. You hear about it changing everything, right? Powering these incredible new tools. But if you peek behind the curtain, you find this intense, almost gladiatorial battle for the foundational piece.
The chips.
Right. And for years, that battlefield, it's felt less like a real competition.
Yeah, more like a kingdom.
Exactly. Dominated by, well, one major
Yeah, absolutely. It's a market landscape really defined by that one company's, significant lead.
Built on powerful hardware, yeah, sure. But maybe even more on that deeply entrenched software kingdom they have, CEDA.
But kingdoms can be challenged.
Always.
And that brings us to the subject of this deep dive. Advanced micro devices, AMD. Long before since CPUs, of course, but they've been strategically and now very, very visibly positioning themselves as the main challenger in this high-stakes AI accelerator race.
And the pile of material we're digging into today, it mostly comes from that one key moment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
AMD's Advancing AI 2025 event back in June.
Right. That wasn't just, another press conference. It really felt like AMD planting a flag.
The declaration of their ambition, their strategy.
Definitely.
Exactly. So our mission here is to take the sources you've provided from that event, the announcements, the tech specs, the messaging.
All that stuff.
And extract the absolute most important nuggets. We want to really understand AMD's multi-pronged strategy, the new tech they reveal, the very real operational hurdles they face.
Which are significant.
Oh, yeah. And what this all truly means, for the future of AI compute and the whole market dynamic.
Yeah, we're going to unpack their latest silicon designs, definitely dive into their big bet on an open software ecosystem.
That's crucial.
Look at the smart strategic moves like those key acquisitions, and then confront the tough realities of actually, manufacturing and getting these incredibly complex chips out into the world.
Okay, let's unpack this then. One of the first and maybe most fundamental takeaways from this event is AMD's strategic transformation.
Right.
They're clearly signaling a move beyond just being a component provider, just selling you a chip.
Yeah, they want to be more than that.
To becoming a full-stack AI solutions provider.
And that shift is critical because the market, especially those massive hyperscalers building the AI clouds you use every day, they're not just buying chips anymore. It's not like picking parts off a shelf.
Right.
They're buying entire integrated systems, racks full of interconnected hardware and software.
And AMD is now explicitly aiming to deliver that whole package.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
We saw this vision articulated with the formal unveiling of their new silicon, the Instinct MI350 series.
Based on CDNA 4.
Right, their next-gen architecture. But they didn't stop there, did they?
No, not at all. They immediately laid out this surprisingly aggressive roadmap.
Yeah, stretching all the way out to 2027.
Exactly, showing plans for the MI400, even the MI500 series.
That long-term visibility must be huge for customers.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. You're planning these multi-billion-dollar data centers.
Takes years.
Years to build and deploy. You need confidence that your vendor is going to keep innovating, right?
For sure.
And a concrete example of this whole integrated system approach was that preview of their Helios rack scale platform.
What, Helios?
It's basically AMD saying, look, we're not just building the engine anymore. We're designing and, planning to sell the entire high-performance vehicle.
And this really sets the stage, doesn't it? It marks this undeniable acceleration toward a serious, a duopoly.
Yeah, duopolistic competition in what has been, like you said, a near monopoly for years.
The market seems ready for it.
Absolutely. It's been hungry for a credible second source, and AMD is really presenting itself as that alternative.
So digging into how they plan to do this, the material seems to point to a strategy built on, three core pillars. The first one being leadership-class silicon.
Right. I mean, you can't compete in AI without competitive chips. That's table stakes.
Obviously.
So AMD has now committed to this annual cadence, new, powerful chips every single year. And critically, their goal isn't just chasing the highest theoretical raw speed numbers, the FLOPS.
Right, not just benchmarks.
Exactly. They're targeting leadership or, at least parity in the specific areas that bottleneck today's complex AI.
Like what?
Well, especially massive language models and the challenges of running them efficiently inference, so things like memory capacity. and how efficiently they can run certain types of calculations. That roadmap out to MI500 in 2027, it's not just pretty pictures.
No?
It's their commitment to sustain technical innovation in those key areas.
Okay, so it's about building chips optimized for the real-world demands of modern AI, not just, like you said, winning a synthetic speed test.
Sure, precisely.
Got it. What's the second pillar then?
The second pillar is an open ecosystem, and this is really AMD's direct strategic counterpoint to the incumbent's famously closed proprietary system.
Right, CDA is the walled garden.
Pretty much. So on the software side, this means leaning heavily into ROCm, their open source platform, positioned as that clear alternative to CDA.
ROCm.
Okay. And on the hardware side, they're embracing open standards for things like networking and rack designs, trying to avoid proprietary interconnects where they can.
Why is open such a powerful narrative here? I mean, doesn't closed sometimes lead to better optimization, like tighter integration?
It can sometimes.
Yeah.
But for the largest customers, think the hypercloud giants.
Yeah.
The biggest fear isn't usually maximum possible optimization, it's vendor lock-in.
Okay. That makes sense.
When you're investing billions, literally billions of dollars, you are terrified of being stuck with a single supplier's tech, their pricing, their roadmap.
You're trapped.
Exactly. Openness gives them choice, flexibility, and importantly, a perceived reduction in long-term risk and cost. It's a potent message for an industry that's naturally wary of monopolies.
Got it. Okay. Leadership silicon, check. A big push on the open ecosystem, check.
Yeah.
What's the third piece of the puzzle?
That's the pivot to end-to-end system integration.
Right, the full vehicle.
Exactly. As we discussed, customers want these integrated racks, not just boxes of chips. And building these requires this really specific, deep expertise in system design, networking, cooling, power delivery.
Stuff AMD didn't traditionally do at this scale.
Not really, no.
And this is where that ZT Systems acquisition fits in, right? That felt like a pretty big deal in the source material.
It was absolutely critical. I mean, $4.9 billion for ZT Systems.
Wow.
A company that specializes in designing server infrastructure for the very hyperscalers AMD is targeting. And it wasn't just about buying assets.
No.
No, AMD strategically sold off ZT's manufacturing operations to Sanmina,
Okay.
but kept their world-class design and engineering teams, and crucially, their existing deep customer relationships.
So they bought the brain power and the connections, not the factories themselves. Smart.
Exactly. This immediately injected the system-level design DNA they desperately needed. It allows them to co-design chips with the system in mind right from day one, enabling platforms like Helios.
Right.
Now, this increases the value they can capture per customer. Selling a full rack is way more lucrative than just a stack of chips.
Why? Of course.
But it also introduces significant new execution risk. Building and validating these complex, massive systems is incredibly challenging, no joke.
Okay, so silicon, software, and systems. Bringing it all together, the analysis in the sources is sort of boiled things down to some core findings. What stood out as the most crucial takeaways?
Well, the core findings really reinforce the strategy we've been talking about. One, AMD is achieving targeted technological leadership with this MI350.
Okay.
Focusing specifically on memory and efficiency for key workloads like inference, that seems clear. Two, their commitment to openness. It's a powerful strategic differentiator. It directly addresses those market anxieties about the incumbent's closed system.
Okay. But it's not all smooth sailing, right? I mean, where are the big challenges highlighted?
Oh, absolutely not. The analysis highlights that the ROCm software ecosystem is still arguably their biggest risk, their biggest challenge.
Well, even with ROCm 7.
Yeah, despite rapid improvements bridging that, 15-year gap they mentioned, in developer maturity, breadth of libraries compared to CU.
Wow, 15 years.
It's an enormous undertaking. It requires sustained, significant investment. You can't fix that overnight.
Okay, so software is the really hard part. What else?
Fourth, and maybe most critically in the near term, their growth isn't limited by demand.
No.
No, the market clearly wants an alternative. People want choice.
Right.
It's limited by supply.
Yeah.
Specifically, access to TSMC's most advanced manufacturing nodes like M3P,
The factories.
and the availability of high bandwidth memory, HBM, they simply cannot build enough chips quickly enough to satisfy the potential demand right now.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
AMD could have built this amazing chip the market desperately wants, but their ability to actually grow is literally capped by whether they can even get enough space on TSMC's factory floor.
Precisely. It's like Imagine having a cure for a global pandemic, but you can
Wow.
only make 10 doses a week.
Oh, wow.
Because the ingredient supplier is booked solid for 2 years by, other major players. It's that kind of constraint.
And they're competing with Apple, Nvidia, Qualcomm.
The biggest names on the planet for that scarce resource.
Okay. And finally, what's the market reaction been like, according to the sources?
The market seems to be in a show-me mode.
Okay, show me the money.
Kind of, yeah. They've seen the impressive roadmap. They seem to like the strategy. But they're waiting for tangible revenue results, from top-tier customers, the big hyperscalers deploying at scale.
Proof points.
Exactly. Before fully factoring AMD into the AI market valuation, it's a matter of proving they can execute and deliver on this vision.
Let's take a closer look at that first pillar then. The silicon itself, the Instinct MI350. Beyond the headline number, what was it, 185 billion transistors?
Yeah, something like that. Huge number.
What makes this chip architecturally interesting, based on what we read?
Well, the real story is how they built it. It leverages AMD's long-standing expertise in chiplet design and advanced packaging.
Chiplets. I've heard that term a lot. How does it work for the MI350 specifically?
Okay, so instead of trying to build one giant complex piece of silicon, a monolithic die, which is really difficult and prone to manufacturing defects at these huge sizes.
Or yields.
Exactly. AMD breaks it down into smaller, more manageable blocks, chiplets.
Right.
For the MI350, they use 8 accelerator complex dies, or XCDs. Think of these as the main engine blocks, right?
Got it.
Where the heavy AI calculations happen. These are built on TSMC's newest, most expensive, cutting-edge N3P manufacturing process.
The fancy stuff.
The fancy stuff. Then, these 8 engine chiplets are stacked using 3D integration onto 2 traffic cop chiplets. They call them IO dies or IODs.
Traffic cops.
Yeah, they handle getting data in and out. And these are built on a slightly older, slightly cheaper 6nm process.
Okay, so they use the really expensive cutting-edge process only where it's absolutely necessary for performance for the compute parts.
Exactly. Smart use of resources. And everything is connected using their upgraded high-speed internal network, Infinity Fabric.
You mentioned that. How fast?
Massive bandwidth, 5.5 terabytes per second between the chiplets. The advantage here is better manufacturing yields because the individual pieces are smaller, easier to make correctly. And it's generally more cost-effective because you only use the most expensive process node for those core compute elements. It's a structural advantage, really, in manufacturing flexibility and cost compared to trying to build one giant, perfect piece of silicon.
Okay, that makes sense. Beyond the chiplet architecture, the sources put a huge emphasis on the memory advantage of the MI350. Why is memory suddenly such a critical thing in the AI world?
Yeah, it's become huge. For today's, bleeding edge AI models, particularly the large language models,
LLMs, yeah.
and the process of running them once they're trained, that's inference, the bottleneck often isn't how fast you can calculate, it's how much data you can feed those calculation units and how quickly you can move it around. So memory capacity and memory bandwidth have become absolutely paramount, critical.
And AMD seems to have a lead here with the MI350.
They do. A significant one on capacity per chip. The MI350 comes with an industry-leading 288 gigabytes of high-bandwidth memory, HBM3E, per chip.
Yeah, 288 gigs.
Yeah, and HBM is that special type of memory stacked vertically right next to the main chip, specifically designed to move massive amounts of data extremely fast.
Right.
288 GB is a big leap. It's, 60% more memory than a single competing B200 GPU, and 1.6 times the capacity on the incumbent's GB200 superchip configuration.
Okay.
And it's paired with 8 terabytes per second of memory bandwidth per chip, which matches the competition on bandwidth.
So what does that extra memory capacity actually mean for the customer running AI models?
It means they can fit much larger AI models onto a single chip, or models that need a longer context window, to understand conversation history.
Right. Fewer chips needed, maybe.
Potentially. AMD claims the MI350 can handle models up to 520 billion parameters on just one chip.
That's huge.
It is huge because if a model is too big for one chip's memory, you have to split it across multiple chips. And that adds communication overhead, latency, complexity. It gets messy.
Oh.
So more memory per chip simplifies the system design, often improves overall efficiency, and crucially reduces the total cost of ownership, the TCO, for the customer.
I remember reading that Sam Altman quote in the sources, something about needing tons of memory. It
Yeah,
felt like a perfect, concise validation of AMD's strategy right there.
it absolutely was a great soundbite for them. And AMD leverages this directly in their messaging. They're claiming the liquid-cooled MI355X variant can deliver up to 40% more tokens per dollar.
Tokens per dollar, that sounds like an efficiency metric.
It is. It's a direct measure of the economic efficiency for running inference on large language models. And that's the metric hyperscalers care deeply about for TCO. It's about the economics.
Okay, let's talk about the performance details. What are the headline performance claims for the MI350? They threw out some big numbers.
They did. AMD touted a 35x generational leap in inferencing.
35x.
Now, like any vendor headline number, you got to dig into the details, right?
Sure. Asterisk supply.
Always. This likely compares performance using these new lower precision calculation formats on the MI350 versus, older formats on previous AMD generations.
Okay.
But the underlying architecture is very competitive, no doubt about that.
And they have different versions of the chip. Liquid and air cooled?
Yes. There's the top-end liquid-cooled MI355X. That's designed for those state-of-the-art liquid-cooled data centers. It hits 20.1 PFLOPS, that's quadrillions of floating point operations per second.
Mind-boggling numbers.
Using FP4 or FP6 precision. PFLOPS is that measure of raw compute speed. Then there's also the air-cooled MI350X at 1,000 watts.
Still a lot of power.
Oh, yeah. For more traditional data centers, offer slightly lower performance but still very competitive. And these high power draws across the industry really show that efficiency is increasingly being measured at the rack level, not just the individual chip level anymore.
Right, system efficiency. And these lower precision formats, SP4 and FP6, are they crucial for inference?
Absolutely. Training AI models usually requires higher precision, like FP16 or FP32, but running the finished model, the inference part, can often be done effectively with lower precision, like FP4 or FP6.
Why do that?
Because it dramatically increases how many calculations you can do per second, and it saves precious memory bandwidth. You can cram more operations through.
Okay.
And AMD has an interesting architectural advantage here.
Right.
Their FP6 operations apparently run at the same speed as their FP4 operations. Yeah, the incumbent rival's B200 often pairs FP6 with the slightly slower FP8 format, so this could give AMD the potential edge, specifically in FP6 throughput. It's a subtle technical detail, but potentially important.
And what did the benchmarks presented in the sources actually show? How did it stack up?
Well, AMD's internal benchmarks, again, grain of salt claimed parity, or even a slight lead.
Against the competition?
Against the competition, yeah. Ranging from maybe 1.2x to 1.3x faster in specific large model inference workloads, like Llama 3.1. Again, you apply healthy skepticism to any vendor benchmark. But it strongly suggests they have closed the raw performance gap, at least in key inference areas. They seem to be strategically picking their battles, focusing on inference, memory capacity, and optimizing for these newer, lower precision formats.
Makes sense. Okay, looking beyond the MI350, the roadmap to 2027 felt like a really critical part of their whole message at that event. Why is showing customers the future path so essential?
Because deploying AI at scale, it's not a one-time purchase.
No, it's a huge commitment.
It's a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment. Customers need confidence that the vendor they partner with today will have a competitive, innovative product line, not just this year, but 3, 5, even 7 years down the road.
Right.
So a clear, aggressive roadmap signals that commitment and allows customers to actually plan their massive infrastructure build-outs. It gives them predictability.
Tell us about the MI400 planned for 2026. What's the story there?
The MI400 is positioned as the next major performance leap, and it's really the heart of that upcoming Helios platform we mentioned earlier.
Right, the integrated rack.
Yeah, this is where AMD's fully integrated rack-scale vision really starts to solidify. The MI400 chip itself is slated for even more memory.
More than 288 gigs.
Yep, up to 432 gigabytes of the next generation HBM4.
Oh, wow.
With a massive 19.6 terabytes per second of bandwidth. AMD's claiming it could deliver up to 10 times the MI350's performance for certain very complex inference models, like those mixture of experts models you hear about.
And Helios is the full package, the whole rack.
Yes. The Helios rack is AMD's direct competitor to the incumbents' integrated rack systems, like the NVL systems.
Okay.
It's a liquid-cooled, double-wide rack designed from the ground up to integrate not just the MI400 GPUs, but also future Zen 6 EPYC server CPUs and high-speed 800-gigabit Ethernet networking.
All AMD inside.
Pretty much. Designing the whole rack allows for deep optimization across power, cooling, data flow, everything. Now, this increases the value and, the stickiness for AMD, but
Execution risk.
it also adds significant complexity and execution risk to their business model. Building these things is hard.
And we even got a glimpse further out into 2027.
Just briefly, yeah, with the mention of the MI500, the timing seems to align with TSMC's incredibly advanced A16 manufacturing process node.
A16, what's special there?
That's planned to feature backside power delivery. It's a major innovation for delivering power more efficiently to these very dense, very power-hungry chips.
Interesting.
And the technical analysis suggests the MI500 platform is being designed for a much larger scale-up domain, potentially allowing maybe 256 chips to act as a single cohesive unit within a rack system.
256 chips working as one. That's massive scale.
It is pushing the boundaries.
That roadmap table we saw in the sources, the one laying out the cadence and key specs for MI350, MI400, MI500, it really does paint a vivid picture of their planned trajectory.
It does. And the competitive table they showed highlighting the differences in things like HBM capacity, where AMD has an advantage now.
Right.
Interconnect speed and maturity, where the rival still has an edge. And system scale, where the rival also has an advantage initially. It really helps define where the key technical battles are going to be fought over the next few years.
Okay. Now let's tackle what many people see as the biggest mountain for AMD to climb.
Yeah.
The ecosystem gambit.
Ah, yes.
The software.
Silicon can be competitive, sure, but the incumbent has this massive, decade and a half head start with its CUD software moat.
This is the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
No question. The incumbent's CDA software ecosystem is incredibly mature. It's deeply integrated into all the major AI frameworks.
Yeah.
And it's supported by this vast global developer community. It is their most significant defensive advantage.
And ROCm is AMD's answer.
ROCm is AMD's open source challenger. And for years, let's be honest, it was widely perceived as being immature, difficult to work with, lacking features.
Yeah, I've heard that. But ROCm 7 seems to represent a significant step forward based on the reports.
Okay, how so?
Well, the sources highlight major maturity and performance improvements. AMD's claiming up to 3.5x performance uplift in some AI models compared to previous ROCm versions.
That's a big jump.
It is. And crucially, day one support for the new MI350 chips. That immediate compatibility is essential. You can't launch hardware without working software.
Right. And this ROCm everywhere strategy, supporting Windows, consumer GPUs, laptops with Ryzen AI, that seems different. What's the play there?
It's a calculated move, I think, to build that developer community from the ground up.
Grassroots effort.
Exactly. By bringing ROCm support to widely accessible hardware consumer Radeon cards, those Ryzen AI laptops, they're lowering the barrier to entry. Developers can learn, experiment, build skills on hardware they might already own.
Create a talent pipeline.
Precisely. A talent pipeline familiar with the AMD ecosystem. It's a long-term investment in developer mindshare, aiming to slowly erode that huge CUDA advantage over time.
And the emphasis on openness itself.
Yeah.
It feels like more than just a technical choice. It's kind of a strategic marketing narrative, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. ROCm being open source, combined with AMD's active collaboration with major AI framework developers, PyTorch, TensorFlow, newer ones like vLLM, SGLang, that resonates really strongly with large customers. They want alternatives. They want to avoid vendor lock-in. And openness offers them that control and flexibility they crave.
Plus, the AMD Developer Cloud helps too, I guess.
Yeah, making it easier for potential customers and developers to actually get hands-on access to the hardware for testing and porting code, reducing friction.
And seeing major players line up, even tentatively.
Yeah.
OpenAI, with Sam Altman's endorsement.
Yeah, that was notable.
Meta, Microsoft, xAI, seeing them publicly aligning or collaborating with AMD, that has to be a powerful signal to the rest of the market.
It's incredibly important. These are the companies driving AI deployment at the largest scale. And they have a vested interest in fostering a competitive landscape. They don't want a monopoly either. So their collaboration, their deployment of AMD tech, it provides tangible validation and encourages others to take a serious look. Meta deciding to deploy MI300X and collaborating on the MI400 roadmap. That's a very real example of this alliance of challengers forming.
And we're seeing those translate into actual business wins now, right?
Yeah.
Like Oracle Cloud's plan for those massive ZS-scale clusters using the MI355X.
Yeah, huge scale.
And Crusoe's $400 million order. That's real money.
Those large customer wins are absolutely vital. They provide validation, scale, and critically, the revenue needed to fuel future R&D. They show that the strategy is actually starting to translate into tangible business results. It's not just talk anymore.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, let's look at the people and strategic acquisitions driving this whole shift. Dr. Lisa Su's leadership seems absolutely central to all this.
Unequivocally, Dr. Su has clearly made AI AMD's top priority. She's infused the company with this long-term vision and this intense focus on winning those hyperscale customers. You also have Forrest Norrod leading the data center group, who has a deep understanding of those customers.
Right.
And Vamsi Bopanna, who's the key figure driving the maturation of that absolutely vital ROCm software ecosystem. Strong leadership team focused on this.
And the acquisitions. It sounds like they've been strategically buying capabilities they needed to accelerate this whole transformation. They couldn't wait to build it all themselves.
Exactly. Building all these complex capabilities organically would just take too long in this fast-moving market. The $4.9 billion ZT Systems acquisition was perhaps the most impactful one.
Right, we talked about that. They kept the team, sold the factories.
Yeah, remember, they shed the lower-margin manufacturing but retained the high-value design teams and those crucial customer relationships.
So buying the brains and the Rolodex, not the building itself.
Precisely. That brought in immediate world-class system design expertise, absolutely essential for building platforms like Helios and co-designing chips and systems effectively. And Doug Huang, the former ZT president, he's now leading AMD's data center platform engineering.
Oh, wow.
A clear signal of how central that acquired expertise is to their strategy now.
And what about that string of pearls phrase used in the sources, the smaller software company acquisitions?
That's all about building the software DNA rapidly. The sources mentioned over 25 smaller acquisitions of teams from specialized software companies. This is AMD pragmatically buying expertise and accelerating development in critical niche areas of the ROCm software stack.
What kind of areas?
Compilers, inference optimization, kernel development, highly specialized stuff. Companies like Brium, Nod.ai, Untether AI, Lamini were mentioned as examples.
Yeah.
It's a smart way to jumpstart software capability, fill those gaps quickly. But, integrating that many different teams and cultures is always a challenge in itself.
Sure, integration is key. Okay, all this ambition, all this strategy, eventually it runs headfirst into the hard physical operational realities of the semiconductor industry.
The messy real world.
And as we touched on earlier, the biggest one seems to be the TSMC dependency and capacity constraints.
This is, right now, probably AMD's most significant bottleneck. Their most advanced chips, they require manufacturing on TSMC's leading-edge process nodes like N3P. But that capacity is extremely scarce and incredibly high demand globally. Everyone wants it.
Competing with the absolute biggest tech players in the world for that limited factory space.
Exactly. Apple, Nvidia, Qualcomm, others. They've booked much of TSMC's most advanced capacity well into 2026 already.
Wow.
So estimates suggest AMD might only secure enough wafers for roughly, say, 80,000 MI350 packages in the second half of 2025.
80,000. How does that compare?
Well, to put that in perspective, the incumbent is shipping orders of magnitude more GPUs than that in a single quarter.
Okay, so it's a real constraint. Demand is strong, maybe stronger than supply.
Correct. Their growth potential in the near term is absolutely capped by supply, not by demand. This is why you hear Dr. Lisa Su advocating so strongly for a more robust, geographically diverse semiconductor supply chain.
Right, building more fabs elsewhere.
It's a long-term strategy to reduce this critical dependency risk, not just for AMD, but for the industry.
Are there other supply chain risks they have to manage besides just the fabs?
High bandwidth memory, HBM, is another absolutely critical component. It's complex to make, too.
Right, the fast memory.
Yeah. AMD seems to have been prudent here, though. They've implemented a dual sourcing strategy for HBM3E, buying from both Samsung and Micron.
Smart. Don't rely on one supplier.
Exactly. Having multiple suppliers is key to mitigating potential disruptions if one has issues.
And we can't really ignore the impact of geopolitics, can we?
No, definitely not. The ongoing U.S. export restrictions to China significantly shape the global market. AMD, like other U.S. companies, has to navigate these complex regulations. This creates a somewhat bifurcated global market. It limits sales of their most advanced chips, like the MI350, to mainland China.
Yeah.
But it also potentially cedes that large market segment to maybe lower performance chips or complex gray market workarounds or even domestic Chinese alternatives eventually. It's a tricky landscape.
Finally, let's talk about pricing and TCO. It sounds like AMD isn't necessarily going for the absolute lowest sticker price with these chips, but aiming for better overall economic value. Is that right?
That's absolutely the strategy. They haven't publicly announced list prices for the MI350 series yet, as far as I know. But their consistent messaging focuses on total cost of ownership, TCO, and price performance.
Right, that 40% more tokens per dollar claim again.
Exactly. That claim for the MI355X is a direct pitch to the core economics that drive purchasing decisions for the hyperscalers. It's about how much work you get done for every dollar spent over the lifetime of the hardware.
How does that TCO actually compare in the analysis? Is it compelling?
The analysis suggests the MI355X is highly competitive, particularly for inference workloads, and especially for running those large models that really benefit from its large memory capacity.
Okay.
For the absolute largest training jobs, the ones that require massive scale-up across thousands of GPUs, the incumbents' largest systems, like the GB200 NVL racks, might still have an edge due to their mature interconnect technology.
Right, the NVLink stuff.
Yeah, but AMD is clearly aiming to be economically compelling for a wide range of high-volume AI workloads, even as they continue to mature that ROCm software ecosystem. The goal is to make the TCO attractive enough for customers to make the switch.
And having a competitor focused on driving down TCO.
Yeah.
That ultimately benefits the entire market long term, right?
Yeah.
Puts pressure on everyone.
Absolutely. Competition drives innovation. It puts downward pressure on pricing eventually, and it benefits the customers by giving them choice. It's healthy.
So zooming out, what's the overall market and financial outlook based on everything we've discussed from these sources?
Yeah.
What's the big picture?
Well, AMD's strategic push, it's really poised to fundamentally alter the AI hardware market. Introducing a credible second source is essential, and it disrupts what has been, let's face it, a near monopoly for years. This competition is healthy. Like we just said, it accelerates innovation, pressures pricing, gives customers much-needed choice. We are clearly seeing this market begin its transition into a competitive duopoly.
Finally, maybe two players. And for AMD's stock, which, many people watching this space follow closely, what's the take?
Yeah, AMD's success in AI is absolutely the key driver for their future growth. It's make or break for their valuation story, really. The market reaction right after the Advancing AI event was perhaps a bit measured, maybe slightly underwhelmed. A show-me response, like we said, with a modest dip in the stock.
Okay.
But analyst sentiment seems to remain broadly positive. You look at the price targets mentioned, ranging from the low 130s up to $170.
Quite a range.
Yeah, but mostly buys or overweights. It signals a general belief in the long-term story, assuming they can execute.
And what about the actual revenue potential? Can this really move the needle for a company AMD size?
Oh, it's massive if they execute. AMD already raised their 2024 forecast for AI chip revenue to $4 billion.
Just for AI chips.
Just for AI chips. Analyst projections see their data center GPU revenue potentially hitting $6 billion in 2025, and accelerating to maybe $10 billion, $12 billion, maybe even more in 2026 if those system-level solutions like Helios really gain traction.
That's serious money.
It is. The long-term potential, if they capture even a significant minority share of the projected huge AI market by, say, 2028, it could fundamentally transform their earnings per share. Their EPS could go way up.
So the valuation could look attractive down the road.
Yeah, the stock's valuation looks potentially attractive compared to its history and maybe even its peers if, and it's a big if they can successfully navigate all those operational and execution risks we talked about.
Which, as we've discussed throughout this, are significant. This isn't a done deal by any stretch.
Absolutely not. It's a high-stakes, multi-front battle they're fighting. Huge opportunity, huge risk.
So we've really taken a deep dive here into the material you shared, unpacking AMD's incredibly comprehensive strategy. I mean, they're attacking on the silicon front, the systems front, software, strategic partnerships. It's a full-court press. They have undeniably laid out a credible plan to challenge the incumbents' long-held dominance in AI hardware.
They really have. They've built a clear pathway and firmly established themselves as the primary contender. the era of a single unchallenged ruler in this foundational layer of AI hardware.
Well, it's definitely coming to an end. Things are getting interesting.
And this deep dive, hopefully, shows you, the listener, the intricate, high-stakes battle happening just beneath the surface of all the AI tools and services you hear about every single day.
Yeah.
Understanding these fundamental technology shifts, the supply chain realities, the market dynamics, it's absolutely key to grasping where AI is heading next.
It really is. It's not just about the headline-grabbing chatbots or image generators. It's about the foundational compute infrastructure, the software ecosystems, the manufacturing capacity, and these huge strategic maneuvers playing out on a global stage. It's fascinating stuff. So, as this AI chip war intensifies on this long road to a potential duopoly, here's a provocative thought for you to consider as you process all this information we've discussed. What do you think will ultimately be the single most decisive factor for AMD's success in truly capturing significant market share? Will it be achieving and maintaining technical superiority in their silicon? Will it be successfully building out that vibrant, adopted open software ecosystem with ROCm? Or will it simply be their ability to overcome the tough operational hurdles and just build and ship enough chips to meet the soaring demand?
That's a great question. All three are obviously necessary, right? You need all of them. But perhaps one holds the ultimate key to unlocking their full potential. It's a fascinating thing to ponder. Which lever matters most?
We'll leave that thought with you.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into AMD's ambitious AI gambit based on the sources you provided. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the details, and keep exploring the fascinating world of AI.